Alright, now we actually have another buff breakdown. Unlike last week when we were expecting to do something for Olympus, sadly no buffs there of any kind. But with the release of the new Halloween event, we actually do get 2 new buffs. So this is already a lot more content for me to do, considering we got new servants and, you know, other kind of stuff, fun stuff anyway. But yeah, for today we got buffs for Qin Liangyu of all people, yes. And then the 3rd buff to Mr. Fister Yanqing himself. Now, first of all, I do want to say something. This is quite a remarkable feat in and of itself, this buff right here for Liangyu. You know why? Because I believe this is the first time they have ever buffed someone who is a DPS with a self-buffing MP, if that makes sense. Servants like her, First Emperor, Super Ryan, Hozoin, probably some others too that I'm just forgetting. I think this is the first time any one of them has had a buff happen. And I always thought they would never buff them, because again, they're probably scared to make them too broken or something. But yeah, Liangyu now has a buff. So what are we working with here? It is a skill buff. And I already have to apologize in advance because I am using Atlas today to display this stuff, because the wiki still hasn't updated it like 6 hours later. Not even that much, never mind. But yeah, usually they update it fast, but I guess because the all new stuff today, they still haven't done it fast, so we're just gonna have to use Atlas to display this. It doesn't look as nice, but yeah. Here's this skill before the buff. Okay, so you get a self guts for 2 times 3 turns, right? Not bad, actually. It's kind of nice having a guts with, you know, multi-proc. Then you charge yourself up to 20%, which, you know, is alright, I guess. On an 8-turn cooldown, that's all the skill did. It wasn't bad, though, because again, a double guts is still nothing to scoff at. It's still kind of rare, and it is a fun effect to have. It's good for survival. But now, what do? The cooldown remains the same. But first of all, they upped the duration of the guts. It's still a 2 times one, but instead of 2 times 3 turns, it is now a 2 times 5 turns one, which makes it much easier to use. You might think that difference of 2 turns might not make a big difference. It kind of does when you think about it, especially when it's because now it's a 5-turn guts as well and an 8-turn cooldown, meaning you can pop this very early and still be pretty safe, honestly. As for the rest of the stuff, what did they do? They also changed the battery. Instead of 10 to 20%, it is now 20 to 30% battery, which again, this one, probably the smallest change here, if anything. But then they also added a completely new effect. Ignore this line, it's for the enemy version. She now gets stars per turn, every turn. Not for 3 turns, but for 5 turns. Man, that is kinda insane. 15 stars every turn for 5 turns? Even on an 8-turn cooldown, that's kind of fat, dude. Like, wow. This is now a pretty damn good skill. And this is honestly a great effect to add to her, I agree with chat, because she had a lot of crit synergy to begin with, just never a good reliable way for herself to generate a lot of stars. Sure, her deck is okay for it, and she even has quick buffs, but as a Lancer, she would never still, like, generate a ton of stars. You would definitely still need supports that help with that, or CEs, or both in some cases. But with this, it is much easier to get her to crit with all those nice buffs of her, be it from her skills or the MP. So this is now a really, really good skill. It's actually quite a big buff, I would say. Now, in my Lancer tier list, I had her at a C+, which honestly, again, I admit, it was maybe not the most fairest spot to begin with, because here's the thing, I never really had that much use or experience of using her to begin with. So I'm pretty sure even back then I said it was kind of an unfair placement, if anything. Just a lack of experience with her. But with this, she should definitely be higher than a C+, for sure. But how much higher is the question? I don't know. Again, still haven't really, I can't lie to you, I haven't really used her that much. She looks like a pretty fine crit DPS option now. You gotta realize that she still doesn't have a damaging MP, obviously, which does, you know, limit some damage potential. She still doesn't hit as hard as like Super Ryan or First Emperor does with their crits. So, but obviously you can't expect much from, you know, 4 stars anyway compared to those limited 5 stars. But I feel like she could be bumped an entire tier, like chat says, to B+, honestly. I could honestly see her being a very viable crit DPS option now. Will she compare to the top Lancer DPSs? Still, probably not. But is she much better now? I would say so. I can't really see the buff not being a big deal for her. And she even has a bit of solo potential. Is not amazing though, but there is a bit of that, so, you know, I guess it helps a bit there too. If anything, this is better for the team comps, in my opinion. But hey, I do think this buff in particular is great. Now, the other buff is a bit more interesting. It might not be, like, directly that big of an impact for the character themselves in terms of the gameplay. But honestly, this is already the third buff Mr. Yanqing has already received. So let's take a look at what we're working with here. It's for the first skill. He already buffed his second skill and the MP, but now it's for the first skill here. So before, again, apologies for the dog. It's just a rotten day for me. I'm super salty because of Gacha, and now the dog is also going off because something's happening outside the house. It is what it is. I can only apologize. But yeah, what the skill used to do is give him a self-absorb for 1 turn, 600%. It's all right. And then MP gain by up to 30%, but also only for 1 turn. On a 5-turn cooldown, kinda weak, honestly. Kinda weak compared to a lot of modern skills. It's just not that great. There's a lot of downtime, and the numbers aren't super high either. Then, okay, so with the buff, they didn't change anything for the old stuff. The cooldown is the same, the absorb is the same, the MP gain is the same, right? I wish they kind of changed those a little bit, like with Liangyu, they changed a couple of her old effects too while adding the stars per turn, but here they only added new stuff. They added 2 new things. Now, the great thing is that they're both 3-turn effects, so now the skill being on a 5-turn cooldown looks a little bit better for uptime, and they're damage modifiers, and they are against lawful enemies and evil enemies, okay? So there are 2 separate damage modifiers by up to 30% each. Now, in case you're curious as to how much, you know, this impacts him, I actually did some research before this. Now, for his best case scenario, which is riders, there are 13 lawful riders and 9 evil riders, and 2 that are both, which is lawful evil, them being Yvonne and Maid Alter. Those 2 are his absolute best case scenario, having full attack and defensive advantage, while also enjoying 60% bonus damage from both of these modifiers. So he's now like the ultimate Maid Alter and Yvonne killer, if anything. Now, I also counted Berserkers, because, you know, you can still use anyone that's not like a Berserker or a Shielder against Berserkers and still do fine, including Assassins. So, in terms of Zerks, we have 7 lawful ones, 15 evil ones, and there are 3 that are lawful evil, which are Arjuna Alter, Morgan, and Hijikata. Again, I may have missed something because I did the count fast, but yeah, there you go. So total, for either bonus, for riders, there are 22, which also includes the 2 best case scenarios, by the way. And for Zerks, there are also 22 total. So that's quite a high number, honestly, for at least to be able to at least use one of these 2 bonuses for 30% damage. And then in, you know, of those 44 cases, 5 of them are both, is not bad, honestly. So, while the buff is a bit niche, I feel like there's a lot of targets for him to hit anyway, honestly. But I would have wished for them to have buffed the original values a little bit. At least make the... I feel like they should have made the absorb 3 turns. Because from what I remember, his second skill is already a good crit one. Yeah, when you look at the second skill, it's a 3-turn crit damage buff on a 5-turn cooldown, with the quick up and the star gen as well. I think they should have made the star absorb 3-turn as well. That would have made for a really nice synergy. Now it's a bit awkward still. Now on my assassin tier list, I had him at a B+. Would I change this? Maybe not, honestly. Obviously, there are cases where he will do now a nice chunk more damage, but in many cases still, he's still the same. Right? And not every enemy even has an alignment to begin with. So in case you're finding like Rider mobs or Berserker mobs, for instance, for damage, they might not even have alignments, so you're still not going to get anything out of this then. So I might just honestly keep him at B+ then, still, even after 3 buffs. He's not bad by any means, just not like a top tier single target option or anything. he's like half star generator, half DPS himself. He's always been like in kind of an awkward spot. Like, he's not an amazing DPS by any means, but he's a fairly good star generator at least. But to be honest, nowadays, with all the tools we have available, you rarely would pick anyone to generate stars anyway, at least via, you know, face cards, which is what he does, even though he has a bomb as well. You would just probably use CEs or supports that do that instead, like flat out supports, not just like half DPS, half support. So I feel like I'm just gonna keep him in B+ still, even after this buff. So there you go. Not the greatest buffs I've ever seen overall, but I do really like this Liangyu buff. I do think it's very much spot on, makes the skill much less awkward to use, and now it looks like a really amazing skill, and the stars per turn very much help her to be a much more consistent crit DPS as well. And for Mr. Fister, most of his damage is probably going to stay the same, but in a lot of cases you can find, you know, situations where he can at least activate one of those damage modifiers from this new buff, so would not discount him by any means. So with that, I'm probably gonna wrap up this buff breakdown. If you enjoyed this quick analysis, do me a solid and press the like button. Again, sorry if I sounded a bit down on this video. It's just this is like the end of my stream today, and just kind of had like a rotten day. It is what it is, just one of those days, but hey, hopefully you enjoyed the video anyway. Stay subscribed, stay tuned, more videos on the way, lots of stuff to cover. Good luck if you're rolling or doing anything else, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And a peace out.